Well, thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Honored and delighted that we get to play once again and expand the awareness and the utility of these amazing first-century tools that, well, rather simply, when applied, you don't even have to believe it, but when applied, changes lives. So that's what we're here to do, to support every person who's ready to make the move into higher and higher states of emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual functioning. We're here to support you, and delighted that you're here to lend the ears to extend the energy of this understanding to more and more minds around the globe. So, Ms. Janine, do we have anybody on the phone with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room as a starting point?
No, it is all quiet on this end.
Okay, is Craig with us today?
Let me look for his number.
I kind of had a sense yesterday before when we finished that perhaps there would be some more questions or thoughts or process. So just wondering before we move forward.
He's not.
Well, we'll hold space for whatever is happening for him. And if you're out there in listener land and you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, one of those syndicated stations, then our call-in number is, if you want to dial in directly, 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel. Jeannie will introduce you by your area code, and we'll be having a conversation. So if you're out there in listener land with any kind of questions, push 1. Let's have a conversation before we move into the material from the Gospel of Thomas.
Susan's hand is up, but I believe it's left over from Dr. Tim, but let's check.
Well, let's say hello to her anyway. It's always fun to say hello to Susan.
Hey.
Hey, young lady, welcome.
Hi, guys. I was thinking of pressing 1 too, but it's just an updater. It really isn't a question, although I'm sure there are a pile of them waiting there somewhere. We're just doing absolutely great with this little family. They are
nice.
Such a delight, and Jonathan's helping find work for the older boy until he goes to electrician school, which isn't starting till January. So the poor guy is at loose ends. He's helping around the house. He's helping train Jonathan's dog. He's such a willing worker. It's just great. But you know, an interesting thing happened. He applied to a Wegmans, which is a big, wonderful grocery store here. He applied on the phone. I'm sure his interview was respectable. I don't know what he said. But they turned him down, and they wouldn't tell him why. So Jonathan called them, and he got their headquarters, and they said they'd call the store where he had interviewed and find out. And it turns out that they were angry at him because he had called himself white. They asked for your race. Well, he's not black. He's not Hispanic. He's Arabian. He's Iraqi. His skin is white, maybe olive, like anybody's. But he didn't know what to say, so he put Caucasian, and they thought he had lied. What do you think of that?
Michael, you're talking, but you're not coming through the microphone.
Excuse me, Susan, I was mute challenged. Okay. So it's interesting that, you know, when we recognize everybody's got a reality and people can project their unresolved anger onto anything or anybody, well, we'll hold a space that perhaps Jonathan's inquiry will open the gates again for that cultural misunderstanding to be reinterpreted, and maybe that'll be the job that takes him through to school.
Yeah, it might be. He's just come back from a very successful interview about 20 minutes away at a restaurant, and he's not sure what they'd have him do. He's happy to wait tables. He's happy to wash dishes and wash floors. And they're going to interview him a second time. I guess that's a good sign. But it was in person. and he said it went well. He's just, it's great. And also, our refugee center is now at the point where we are turning people away because so many people are coming in. We have a wait list, as I think I told you. And 2 days ago, a Mexican family arrived, 5 kids, and a husband who's already working, but they had nowhere to stay. And so the volunteers there have been pooling money to put them up in a hotel, and they've gathered enough money now to put the down payment on an apartment so they have a safe place. And I'm just telling you that because it's a gorgeous story at a time when you hear a lot of not gorgeous stories.
It's awesome to hear about people who understand who their neighbors are and are willing to be there in support of neighbors when so many, even from the so-called religious perspective, are thinking that because someone's from another land that they must be foreigner, they're not neighbors. And the fact that the Aramaic word, interestingly, you've heard me talk about Dan McDougall, and I remember one of my favorite stories that he used to tell was when they were doing the translation work on the word neighbor, some of the translators kept coming back with, or one of them, a fellow named Shapley, who was one of the top Aramaists in the world, kept coming back with a definition of the word neighbor as somebody, kind of who lives down the block. And the other translators all agreed that neighbor is a mental word, which means anyone you think about. Anybody who's mentally near to you is your neighbor. And kind of a tiebreaker, there was a man named, let's see, what was his name? Marshuman. Yeah, he was what would be considered the Pope of the Church of the East, who had escaped to America, and he lived in Chicago. Dan used to describe him as being older than God, and Marshuman was the tiebreaker for any Aramaic question because he was a native Aramaic speaker, and his tradition for generations had been the Aramaic form of quote-unquote Christianity. And I can remember Dan just, when he was running this past him, and he motioned as though he were Marshuman, and he just kind of used his arm to wipe away the energy, just wipe it away. And I know what's got Shapley confused. He's reading those new dictionaries they wrote in the 6th century. So going back into antiquity and recognizing the real meaning of the word, and that's awesome that the church that you're a part of is so conscious and so coming together to support.
Aren't they just?
You remind me also, when you speak of the willingness of this young man, way back in my early business days, I was in the restaurant business, and it was actually in a small town, and a refugee family came to town, and this man came to my restaurant and applied. And as you said about this gentleman, the thing that triggered it was, I'll do dishes, I'll wash floors, I'll do whatever needs to be done. I need to feed my family. And this man had a PhD and had been a very wealthy, accomplished businessman in and I don't remember now what his home country was, but it was one of the Middle Eastern countries. And he'd been displaced, and he was just like, I'll do anything. And it's like, when I saw his resume and talked to him, and obviously a very intelligent, cultured man, it's like, yes, I need dishwater, but I can't hire you to wash dishes in my restaurant. That would just be ridiculous. And within a year, he owned the McDonald's franchise, and he'd come totally broke. And he worked. He was willing, and within a year, he was the owner of the McDonald's franchise. So. Some pretty amazing folks come out of the Middle East, and in my experience over the years, the people from Lebanon, from Syria, I mean, they're just wonderful people.
Yeah. Well, when he
and the
got
distortions.
Here, Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm complete.
I was just going to say when he moved into our house, I said, "How are you liking it in the United States?" He said, "I love it here. I love it here. This is a beautiful country with wonderful people." I thought, oh, that's nice to know. I had lost sight of that myself, in part anyway. Yeah. very positive.
Very true. And, another thing that I found interesting, interacting with some of the people who are engaging in verbal, mental, emotional, truth assaulting violence that's happening in our political culture. Many of those people, you meet them one-on-one, and if you're not the wrong skin color, they're just wonderful people who'll go 1,000 miles out of their way to support you. I mean, they're just, the country's full of them. When we were in Missouri, we had to rent a trailer in the place we went by, and the guy couldn't do enough for us.
Yeah.
And sadly, we have this game of prejudice and fraud that definitely needs to be healed in our culture.
It does. Yeah.
So thank you for doing your part, and then some.
Well, this fell into our hands, and we were nervous about it, but it turns out to be so far a real blessing. So I'm getting fat, though. She's cooking more than I should be eating. Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine you fat, young lady. I mean.
Well, I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen. But it's the temptation. Anyway, thanks a lot. I'm going to have to get off the show because Jonathan and I are doing some work now together. That's a whole other story, but I'll report in about that later. So,
all right, well, you have a blessed one.
Carry on. Thanks.
We'll do it.
So much, Michael.
All right, blessings.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay.
Miss
No
Jean,
other hands up?
anything else happening?
No.
Chat room's quiet?
Yep.
No app questions?
No.
All right. Well, then let's head over to look at the next phase of the Gospel of Thomas. For those who might be new to the show, this is a text that was purportedly written by Thomas Didymus, and as opposed to the other canonized Gospels, which are story form, this is a series of sayings from the mouth of Yeshua, and purported to be the secret teachings. If you remember, there's a passage where he's talking to the disciples, and he says, to them, i.e. and them being those who don't have the brain cells, I speak in parables because they don't have the brain cells. They can't hear me. So there's no sense speaking directly, so I use parallel meanings. I give them something that they can chew on that communicates the message that I want to give. But to you guys, I'm going to give you the straight goods. And here's Thomas's written report of those words from Yeshua. So we finished off yesterday with the idea of a simple one, saying 49. Blessed are the solitary and the elect, and recognize that, one, there has been a game played in the culture of, in the religious culture of the elect, and that there's certain select people, and of course I'm one of them, you're not, are, certain elect people, well, they're chosen, and therefore. And the correction of that idea is that elect means that the Creator put the breath of life in you. That's all. Everyone, there's that. How does that saying go? Many are cold, but few are frozen. No, many are called, but few choose to do the work. So, being elect, being called, is something that goes to everyone to function as a true human being. And then this idea of solitary, that when we take the time to follow that directive that said go into the closet and close the door, then we access deeper and deeper parts of our minds. And ultimately, in Aramaic, that word tuvehun, that is translated in the Beatitudes as blessed are they, speaks of a set of instructions for how to access the deepest guidance system in you that is the only thing that will guide you to your highest life. There's nobody out here. Me, nobody out here. They went to Yeshua and they tried to make him the one. Oh, you're the one. You're the special one. He said, why do you call me good? None of us is. But, of course, if you got a different story going, you can't really go to the words he said, or, boy, it really blows that story out of the water. So that's one of the prerequisites to activating, to accessing the deepest levels of what's going on in our own minds. We have to take the time apart from the world. Go into the closet and close the door. Get quiet, breathe, touch into what's inside of you, and clean up what's there. And then saying 50. If they say to you, whence have you come? Tell them, we have come from the light, the place where the light came into being through itself alone. It stood and it revealed itself in their image. If they say to you, who are you? Say, we are his sons and his daughters, and we are the elect of the living Father. In other words, Yeshua is not talking about something out of antiquity. He's bringing corrections to antiquity. You know, if you listen to the old stories, you've got this heinous, punishing, angry, vengeful God that's going to get you if you don't follow every word that you're told, he said. Yeshua comes forward. He doesn't talk about that dude at all. He brings a total correction. He says, first of all, he uses a very intimate name. He speaks about Father. And then, as opposed to the pretense that, of course, he's the only one, you know, the words that were translated, the only begotten Son, in Aramaic it speaks of the first begotten. And you'll notice that when he gave the instructions to people on how to function as a space of love, he didn't say my Father, he said ours. So he's bringing correction, that it is the Creator's delight to deliver to you everything that you would put you into what you might call paradise. However, if your carbon-based memory and your past and your generational patterns have different ideas about poverty and fear and trauma in relationships and, you know, separation and pain, then the Creator has no choice but to bring you what you ask for. So Yeshua gives a correction. He says, yeah, well, you ask and then you receive. Stop blaming. You know, so many people have got this big blame thing going for the Creator. How could God let such a thing happen? God didn't let such a thing happen. Well, I thought God was omnipotent. Yeah. And what did omnipotence do? He said, okay, you're in charge. You ask and I'll deliver it to you. He didn't say you ask for the good stuff and I'll deliver it to you. He just said you ask. And if your mind is off base for the state of being that you are as love, if your mind holds generational patterns of, well, you know, relationships always end up in trauma, present in your mind is your asking. Your asker is in your unconscious. You know, you tell the average person you ask for this, when they look at the traumas and terrors and problems in their lives, they say, well, I've never had to ask for those things. Right, in your head, you never ask for those things in your conscious awareness. But when you hold these unconscious energetic dynamics, remember the word for the unconscious in Aramaic is the heart. And Yeshua said, take care of the heart, your heart, or it's out of your heart that come the issues in your life, not out of the Creator. Yes, the Creator is the delivery vehicle. There's only one power operative. You know, you and I don't know how to do a darn thing. You know, and an example I use in a live workshop, so I'll say to people, anybody here know how to raise your arm? And several people raise their arm and go, sure, of course. So wait a minute. I didn't ask if you could raise your arm. I asked if you knew how. Well, of course, I just go, well, no. You're doing it. How do you do it? What parts of the brain? What brain cells have to fire? What nerve pathways do they have to follow? To what muscles? And what are the balances and counterbalance for you to do something as simple as raise your arm? And I don't care. You can have the most intelligent scientist, physiologists in the world, and they can't tell you the answer to that question. What are the electrical signals that go to this part of the muscle and that part of the muscle and the counterbalancing muscle? Tell me what they are. We don't have a clue. But there's a power in us that does, and that power said, I'm turning it over to you. It's all yours. Tell me what you want. And anything you hold in mind, whether it's your thought or the generational patterns, is your asking. And if you keep your asking in the dissociated mind, in the unconscious state, then you're asking for things that you don't know you're asking for. So all that has to happen in order to ask for something is pass an energetic pattern across your mind. And to the power that is within you, what Yeshua called the Father within, whose good pleasure it is to deliver to you whatever you choose. And that's not a religious idea. That's just how life works. That's where we live. So they then say, if Yeshua says, if they ask you, if they say to you, who are you? Say, we are the sons and we are the elect of the living Father. Like here, now, in my life today. Not back in some old fogey's mindset from some time when they didn't have a clue or understand. And then it says, if they ask you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Tell them it is movement and rest. What does that mean? What he's saying is that it is the aliveness that we express in the present moment that is the signal that the power that runs the universe is flowing through you. And to really truly have a human life, because human life is the created essence of love, love must be flowing in your cells in order to have life. So this whole passage, which is saying 50 from the Gospel of Thomas, is you came from the light, are the offspring of the Creator. And sadly, many people energetically and traumatically force different ideas on people than that. So even if you do not yet know, if you know, by the age of 4, my take is the average person in this culture has been brainwashed into being a very devout, religious member of the one world universal religion of blame. And if you are a member of that church, then you don't know who you are. However, even if you do not yet know what your true nature is, begin to acknowledge it. Especially in this conflict-ridden world, has specifically its aim to destroy the expression of being. The hostility and fear that has accumulated over generation upon generation upon generation has taken over human life. And so even if you're not in touch with it, if you've got unresolved generational patterns of rage and guilt and hatred and vengeance or whatever, begin to speak of who you really are. Even if you don't believe it yet, that your true identity is literally the offspring of light and love. 17:28, for in him, the Creator, we live, move, and have our being, for we are also his offspring. Now, the his there is not a male his. It's not about the patriarchal culture that wants to own it all and be in control. The one that every time the matriarch begins to rise, the patriarch comes along to stamp it down. It's happening in the world right now. So, in the Creator's essence, and who can describe the Creator? No one. But you and I, and I don't care where you are. You may be in Timbuktu today. You and I are both moving in the energy field of what Yeshua referred to as the Father, power, the creative force. Now, we try to remake God in our image and likeness. We want a man or a woman or somebody with a beard and long hair and sits on a throne. But if Yeshua is correct here, in him we live, move, and have our being, and we are his offspring. I mean, how do we live in that? How do we comprehend that? It's like an ant looking at a television series and trying to explain it, trying to figure it out. The capacity isn't there. But you are literally the offspring of the Creator. And idea has been lost in your bloodline, and you're the early adopter that's going to reclaim it. It's going to take some significant work. You're going to go through and have to deal with some pretty heavy-duty energies. That's the healing process. It's not Dr. Feelgood. But what you'll notice is once you've got the tools and you begin to use them, everything begins to change. And statement 51, his disciples said to him, on what day will the rest of the dead come into being? And on what day will the new world come? So here are people, remember we talked about John the Baptist, carbon-based memory, being the highest of those born of man, or woman, pardon me, out of that passage we covered yesterday. So here's someone functioning of carbon-based memory that everybody looks at, and maybe they are the greatest, they are the highest and the best. But they're asleep. Again, remember that story? Adam is created, and it says he fell into a deep sleep, and they don't talk about him waking up. Because that sleep prevents one from being aware of what's really going on. So in response to this, when will the new world come? He says, that's what you're awaiting has come, and you don't even know it. You're asleep. You're unconscious. It's here. It's available right here, right now, in the very present moment. But it isn't available from the past. So in essence, his reply is, you missed it because you were still asleep in Adam, still asleep in the clay, red clay. And Adamos means red clay. Your being is a created essence of love. Your physiological expression is called Adam. And you remember that passage where Moses marries the two. Moses brings the two together. Creation of humans in the image and likeness of the Creator. He created them, male and female. So here we are, humans created. And then he says there was no man to till the soil. Which you say, wait a minute, he just talked about the creation of, right, there was no physiological expression yet. There was no red clay. And that's where he introduces Moses and introduces the story of Adam. And then he completes. We've got the creation of humans. Then we've got the evolution of the human form, Adamos, the red clay. And then what Moses says is, and the Creator breathed into Adamos, into the red clay, into what we call the physical form, the breath of life. And here's where human life begins. And man became a living soul. Now, there are two different words used there. One is Adam and Adamos, and the other is nafsha. Nafsha in Aramaic is a word that describes the created being that you are. Adam describes your body-mind unit. You are not your body-mind unit. You inhabit, you express through your body-mind unit if you're awake. If you're not, then it just runs on automatic pilot, and that was called spiritually dead. So when the breath of life was put into this piece of clay, then we became physiologically expressive human beings. And so what he's saying in this statement 51, he says, you guys missed it. He says that you're asking me about something that's already happened, and you think it's still yet to come. You think it's coming in the future, but you've been lost. And instead of functioning out of the mind we share, the mind that was called the mind of Christ, in you, you're functioning out of your carbon-based memory. So you missed what's true. So the disciples asking that question at that moment are all programmed and focused in the outer world. They have no contact with the inner life that he's leading them to. A newborn child. And I have to acknowledge that I made this mistake with my children when they were born in their early years. Is outer focused. I didn't know any better. Oh, look, here's a trinket. Oh, look, here's a toy. Oh, here's something. Here's something. Oh, look, 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 look. Always directing the child outward. And that's how most people are raised. And then they go to school and they're directed outward some more. Oh, look here in the world, there in the world, there in the world. What are you going to do in the world, in the world, in the world? As though no inner life or inner world exists. And that is the only place that the richness of life comes from. Without it, it's all empty. That's what Paul was talking about when he said, if I have not love, if I have not my human life, and that's what Yeshua is referring to here. These disciples who are asking the question, when's this wonderful thing going to happen? You missed it, and you missed it because you don't know there's an inner life. You don't know of your own created essence. And you remember Paul goes through a whole list of things. If I have not contact with love, if I have not contact with my human essence, love, if I give my body to be burned, I'm as a tingling symbol. If I sell everything I have and give it to the poor, I've wasted my time because I don't have a human life. Fortunately, we've come to understand this with our granddaughter when she came into our lives. She's now 6. And if we say, sweetie, it's time to meditate, she'll sit us down. I'm not sure where she got this, but she will automatically sit cross-legged. It's not something we taught her. And she'll guide us in the meditation, and she'll instruct us to breathe. And she'll instruct us to go inside and touch what's happening inside of us. So it's an internal process, and it's difficult for those who are weaned on the external world to make the shift to the inner world. It's like, oh, I'm too busy. It was interesting. Many people, when they first touch this work, are like, they're so excited. This is so cool. Until they have to start facing what's inside of them that they've never, ever wanted to deal with. And that's why they dissociated from it and created this unnatural, unconscious mind in the first place. And so, yes, do your thing in the world, but make sure that you have a human life to do it from. Or as Paul said, like a tingling cymbal. There's nothing to it. So this shift to the inner world, living from that inner world, and those who, as I said, were weaned on the external world, have difficulty doing that. A couple of things as I was making some notes on this section of Thomas occurred to me in the arena of words. And my offering is that we are each made for literal, physiological, eternal life. Now, nobody believes that because everybody they know over 120 is dead. But is everybody that they know over 120 dead because they believed they were supposed to die, that they bought the lie, that they didn't know that they were eternal energy systems that were designed for eternal life? I mean, literally, physically. Listen to the passage in Revelation that says, to he that overcomes. And what are we talking about overcoming? We're talking about overcoming all of the dynamics that were programmed into us, brainwashed into us by the external world. To he that overcomes, he will not taste of the second death. What's the first death? This particular passage, when they ask him, when are the dead going to come into being, and what day will the new world come? In essence, he says to them, you're already dead. It's come, but you have no contact with the inner world. So as I was writing, I kind of just focused on, or it came to, I was writing this idea of external world, and what popped for the first time in my brain as I looked at it was, if you take the word X out of external, you have eternal. Is it the focus on the external world that ends our eternal lives, that causes us to engage in energetic patterns that never belonged in the human system, that become the chemistry of destruction of the cell, of the organ, of the body? I was having a conversation with a gentleman this morning, and we were talking about Bruce Lipton's work. And precisely from the cell biologist laboratory describes what's being described in the opening words in the book of John, that do not say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh, but rather in Aramaic say in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. And what Bruce is showing is that when you think a thought, you produce literally a molecule inside of your structure, something that is in the range of energy of the non-physical. Once you capture it with your mind, it literally becomes a, what we call physical molecule, literal physiological energetic pattern that is contactable by our senses, or the extensions of our senses, our instruments. And that neuropeptide, that molecule, circulates around in the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, and it lands on the cell, and when it lands on the cell, it energetically inserts itself in the cell. If you gather only mind energy from the realm of being that Yeshua is inviting us into, and that those who are caught in the external world are dead to, then death is your lot in life. That's what it will come to. To he that overcomes, he will not taste of the second death. He will become a pillar in the temple of the Creator. What's a pillar but a fixture? Go out no more. So as I looked at this, it was just kind of an interesting little twist that my mind did of, add the X to eternal and you've got external. When we can shift our focus away from the external, doesn't mean don't play there, doesn't mean don't live there, doesn't mean you have to give it up. Remember, he said, seek ye first what? The community of love. The Greeks translates the kingdom of heaven. That's a totally incorrect translation. Seek ye first the kingdom of the place where you are connected in your being to love and connected into the same energetic field, the same energetic state of being with others. And now you've entered eternal life. Give that up, and you've X'd out eternal life, external. And then as I looked at that, it was kind of just fun to be, I'd like to play with words, you all know that. Then the next thing that occurred to me when I was writing this external world to inner world, if you add a W to the world inner, you now have winner. Case, add one letter, and who knows in antiquity if these were the dynamics that came up with, or that the originators of our language and how it developed, if they understood these dynamics, that if our focus is in the inward world first, doesn't mean don't pay attention to, doesn't mean don't go have fun, doesn't mean play, doesn't mean don't have sex, doesn't mean any of that stuff. It's interesting how sex has gotten a bad rap in so many circles in our culture. And yet, if you go to the scriptures and you go to that conversation with what the Creator purportedly says, and the Creator says, who told you were naked? Like, who gave you all that crap about what I created? Who told you that? It's all a lie. And of course, all of those lies need to be forgiven to get to the truth. So if your focus is on the inner world, then you will be an eternal winner. If your focus is on the external world, then you've X'd out your eternal life. So you're only awake, alive, and in your true human life, is what he's saying here in essence, when you're living from the mind of Christ in you. The mind of the Creator, love, is available to you 24/7, 365, has been from your inception, and will be for the rest of eternity. If you keep your attention on the presence, then you are doing that. You have to do that from the present. And in essence, he's saying, let's go back and quote it. That which you await has come, but you know it not. Why? Because they're focused on the past. You know, we can find from the wisdoms of the past guidance, but you're never going to find your true life there. The whole objective of this whole body of work is to give people a set of tools with which each one uncovers their own true eternal life. And if you do that work, then your whole life, you'll remember in the scriptures, and I can remember thinking this as a kid, came across this passage that said, there'll come a time when your whole life will become a prayer. And I always thought that prayer was, here you are down on your knees with your hands full. It's like, I don't want my whole life to be a prayer. I don't want to be down on my knees with my hands full of my whole life. What a way to live. But when you understand in Aramaic what the word prayer means, it's got nothing to do with putting your order into the cosmic gift catalog. It's got nothing to do with telling the Creator what the Creator should be doing for you today. In the Aramaic language, the word prayer, and you'll remember the disciples were obviously quite confused because they asked him to teach them how to pray. How do you do this thing you call prayer? They obviously didn't know, or they wouldn't have asked him. Must be a pretty important question that he answered, because they recorded it in a fairly significant way. Now, when they were obviously in confusion and asked him, teach us to pray, they obviously didn't know. Do you think that saying a prayer answers their question? You know, imagine I'm a voice coach. I teach people to sing. And you say, Michael, teach me to sing, and I sing a song for you. Would I be teaching you to sing? No. I mean, you may learn something about singing if I sang you a song, but if I were teaching you to sing, I'd be talking about how to hold your lips, how to hold your jaw, your mouth, how to breathe, how to use your diaphragm. That would be teaching you to sing. So he didn't say a prayer. What he did is he gave them a set of instructions. If you want to tap into that, if you go to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by going to our website, whyagain.org, and on the right-hand side, you'll see all the social media links. Go to our YouTube channel and then search for Living, Not Saying the Lord's Prayer. And in that presentation, it's about a 45-minute video. I think it's 45, maybe 42, something like that. But in that video, we point out that he wasn't saying a prayer for people to repeat and repeat. In fact, at one point in his teaching, he says, don't repeat and repeat like the pagans. That's rote memory. That's, you're trying to do something from your mind, and your mind can't do it. Remember, your mind is the one that was so highly admired. The one you're trying to function from was the one that John the Baptist had. He was the highest among women, and it was nothing compared to the lowest who were functioning out of their true mind, the mind of Christ in them. So prayer means in Aramaic to set a trap for God, which sounds pretty weird in this culture. But if you think of it in terms of energy, you know, I have a TV, well, I actually don't, because we've now got cable and such. But I've got a TV antenna on the roof. TV antenna captures the signal from channel 2, and I get a good signal. I get a good picture and good sound in channel 2, because the trap for channel 2, the antenna, is set properly. In essence, the word prayer in Aramaic means that you is informing us that we are designed to capture, literally, to have interactive communication between that in which we live, move, and have our being that's been called the Creator. And in capturing that energy, we bring that energy into the world, and that energy is based in love, and we are able to reflect that into the world. That's what prayer means, to set a trap, to become the space where the energy field in which you live, move, and have your being is reflected accurately without interference from past generational patterns. And those past generational patterns must be forgiven. And sadly, most translations of the Aramaic scriptures, or actually I mistakenly used the word translation because most of it is not translation, it's interpretation. Most of them totally leave out the genius teaching that Yeshua had, the deep understanding he had of how the mind works, how the mental processes occur, what the psychological teachings of Yeshua has been pretty much ignored. In fact, the Kabbalist manuscript is the only one I know of that really offers that level of understanding of how the mind works, and it's just monumental. And you've got to be in that mind, and you've got to be in that space. Otherwise, as he says, when they say, well, when is all this wonderful stuff going to happen? He says, it's already happened and you missed it. You weren't there. You were stuck in unconsciousness. So that's statement 51. And 52, well, actually, we're down to about 10 minutes. So before I go into 52, I'm going to check and see if we've stimulated any questions for anybody. So, Ms. Jeannie, if anybody's out there on the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room, let's take a few minutes and have a conversation.
There is a hand up, and I believe it is Dusty 904. You're on the air.
Well, aloha. I really liked what you said about the, well, about a lot of it, Michael, but that it really struck home, the part where you were playing with the words. Did you come up with the eternal, external, inner thing?
Yeah, that occurred to me. I'm making notes on this yesterday, and as I looked at the words, I had written them out in basically in a sentence, one line beneath another, with the the idea of those weaned on the external world. It's difficult to shift into the inner world, and all of a sudden my brain went external, X is out, eternal life, W, winner. The words were above each other, and it just like boom, stuck out like a healing thumb.
Well, I really love that. I do that, and so what you just said just went. It was like setting a trap for God. I was resonant with that, if you will. And in the family I grew up in, which was extremely dysfunctional, the one good thing that happened was we all like to play with words. And I have a sister that will not go in because of early trauma. She always externalizes. And I am going to a little bit of what you said and kind of play it back to her using those words and let her have fun with the words, because I already have a meditation kind of thing that she and I can do together that we did once and she likes, where she can go in. And those words I think, will be a key in that lock. I am hoping, and I thank you for that.
Well, I'll certainly hold the space for that. And, for those who carry a lot of trauma, they don't go into the internal world because that has to be faced. And it can be pretty tough at first. It's really
Yeah, and that was her case.
And the fact that you can be the safe space for her, that you know the trauma that you held, and that you can hold the space for that, will probably be what assists her through it. And and to use a language that's been misinterpreted, misunderstood, that you can be her salvation. Thinking of it in the true sense of, when we are freed from the trauma, when we're saved from that, that's what they were talking about. It wasn't being saved from some evil force out there in the world that's going to get us. It was the hells that we carry around inside of ourselves, the generational patterns the hurts, the traumas that are just too difficult to face alone. So I certainly breathe with you and hold the space to open that energy for her and free her from it.
I appreciate that a lot, and I'm so am looking forward to that. And also, when you mentioned the trap for God and the RF engineer in me, was thinking resonance, and I wonder if you use the idea of resonance or attunement to God. Is there anything in that word resonance that you can use to further that set a trap for God thing?
Tell me a little bit more about your question, and I'm not quite getting it.
I'm sorry, it was a little abstract, I understand. And
Oh,
when you
that's okay.
said prayer set a trap for God, and you used as an analogy a little bit of an antenna on a roof. And
Right.
of course, what you're doing there is you're tuning to a specific set of frequencies or frequency rather than every darn thing. And right now we're inundated, of course, where we've always been. But so that antenna is resonating with what we want. Do you have any thoughts? I realize we're running out of time a little bit here, but thoughts on how to set that antenna or that receiver or whatever it is that we are to that particular set of frequencies that Yeshua was talking about. With
Absolutely,
the idea of
I do.
Okay.
Yes. So go to the YouTube channel and find that presentation.
Okay,
Not saying
that
Lord's
again,
Prayer, and that's
because
what the whole thing is. Yeah,
can you
living,
say that again?
not
I
saying the
didn't
Lord's
understand.
Prayer.
Right.
Okay, living,
Yes.
not saying Lord's Prayer.
Oh, okay.
And basically, when you go to the Aramaic, and I decode it, I go through the whole thing and offer an interpretation that would be appropriate for today's culture. But basically, what the instruction, it's something people on Sunday morning do the rote, don't repeat like the pagans. And what do most people do? They get together in a building and they go, "Our Father art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will." It's like, no, it's not to be repeated and repeated. That's not it. That's the mind of John. That's carbon-based memory doing it. But rather, the instruction set from Aramaic, and that's what I lay out in that presentation, is the protocol or how to orient and align yourself energetically.
Gotcha.
And you can also, there's a link in that video that you can go to the website and print off the translation that I offer, or it's actually not a translation that I offer, it's an interpretation, because of course we're in a different culture than 2,000 years ago, but what each idea means in this culture would mean is, and personally align and orient ourselves to be the space where, moving through this energy field called love, we get to have induced within our fields, if we're aligned, the information that comes directly from that source. It's an induction process.
Gotcha. Would that be best accessed through your site, or just go to YouTube and punch that in?
If you just go to YouTube, you can, just do a search for Michael Ryce, and that'll take you to our YouTube channel, and then do a search through the links, and there's one that's living, not saying the Lord's Prayer. Actually, there might even be two different videos, two different presentations of that.
Okay, great. I'm trying to keep that simple. It's nothing else for me, so I can watch it first, so I know what the heck I'm talking about with her relative to this way of thinking. And anyways, I guess we're just about out of time, but Michael, I want to thank you for that. I'm going to have so much fun with those words, and also your reminder that and this is what I need to keep personally. I always need to keep remembering that this field that I'm in is love. It's not
Yeah.
and all that other stuff. And,
well, the world has roared in with such insanity. I mean, you look at the history of human beings in the world, and that's and my take would be, when you think of this body-mind unit as a multi-generational database, the stored frequencies of trauma and rage and guilt and damage and destruction and, distrust and all of that, those energetic patterns, if you look at the way humanity's played the game so far, are so deeply embedded that it's, as Yeshua said in this particular saying, you missed it. It's already happened and you missed it. You thought you were looking for it, but you couldn't see it because you were asleep. And so
gotcha.
it is particularly traumatic to go into that inner world and deal with what's there. But underneath it all is everything anybody ever wanted. That's where Yeshua said in a different context, and they turned it into, again, a religious idea, said, seek ye first the community of love, the kingdom of God, and then everything else gets handed. Everything you want in the external world is taken care of because you've now gone into your creatorship. But to get to your creatorship, you got to move the blocks out. You got to forgive everything in you that's unlike the presence of love. And that's the challenging part of the process.
Is there anything in all of that that emphasizes? I mean, I can hear all this, and I can hear what you say, and any of us can, and it's just more. It's more data, and less. Of course, we act on it, but there's the word feeling. The bottom line is kind of a feeling, isn't it not? And is there any reference to that in the Aramaic that?
Well, ultimately, my offering on that idea would be the experience of ourselves as human beings in terms of feeling the presence of love.
Yes,
is overridden by the feelings generated by our thought disorders, by our blame, by our hate, by our vengeance, by our fear, by our murder. I mean, you and I and everybody here has got people in our bloodline that have murdered people and have been murdered by people. And those energetic patterns, if they're never worked through, are passed from generation to generation. So those energetic patterns create feelings, and that inhibits us tapping into our true nature, which by comparison, when you think of it, they refer to the true nature, the Creator's voice, as the still small voice, because love is this subtle energy compared to the roaring insanity of hate and fear and war.
Yes.
And so I'm doing the work of quieting the mind to be able to hear or to be able to tap into the experience of who you are, and then really truly hear and feel that presence is that's the result. That's the fruit of the work.
Gotcha. And I know we have seconds left, and another time I could explain how I came to this, but I'm going to offer that right now, regardless of what happened in the past, we are so inundated. Anybody that can operate from a clear space, from a pure spring, right now, because of everything that's coming at us from so many, we have no idea the sea of guck we're swimming in.
Yeah, the craziness is pretty bizarre. But,
and it's been that way a long time.
It can only touch you if you're in resonance with it, though. Remember our electronics work. It can only get into the instrument if the instrument's got a resonating coil for it. And if I've got a resonating coil for the insanity, then I'm going to experience the insanity. And the world's taught me to blame the world for that, which means I never go in and delete or forgive the coil in myself that receives that insanity. If I remove it, then it has nowhere to land in me, and it has no impact, no matter how crazy it gets. And you're right, it is stark raving insane today.
Yes, and we need a Q multiplier, as would say in HF talk, but to do that. And but
it's called forgiveness.
Yeah, that's a good one. And
That's the tool. Without it,
regardless,
without it, removal does not occur.
Hit. What's that?
But you can only be hit, you know, if there's resonance with it. If there's no resonance, they can throw everything at you that they want to, and it just passes right through. There's nowhere for it to land unless there's something in me that resonates with it.
I understand what you're saying.
The deepest hatred cannot touch a person who has no receiving antenna for the deepest hatred. It can't, there's nowhere for it to be heard, seen, or experienced. Just like, you know, I've got an FM radio here, and I have a favorite AM station that I like to listen to, and I know that station, it's just, I mean, it's literally, if I look out my window here, we've got a radio station right next to us. I can see the antenna. It's an AM station. If I tune my radio, FM radio here, I can turn that dial for the next 500 years, and I won't hear one peep out of that station that's only a few hundred feet away from me, because there's nowhere for that frequency. I mean, it's being broadcast. It's coming through this room big time. I mean, we're closer to this antenna than I wish we were. But it can't land in my FM radio because there's no tuning coil for it. If I freed myself of that rage, of that fear, of that trauma, of all the crap that's being thrown at us, there's nowhere for it to stick because there's no resonance. That's the power of and the whole purpose of the forgiveness process, to free ourselves of anything that puts us in tune with that kind of energy. Make sense?
Sure. I absolutely. There's, you know, where there was time, there's a whole other wraparound that goes with that. But at any rate, I'm going to let it go. I
Monday.
think we're up. So yeah. So well, actually,
Monday
is Teeth Day is Monday.
Oh, awesome. Well, holding the space for that, and maybe we'll talk on Tuesday.